Potentially some of his team is joining us today to talk about some community engagement that the Community Development Department is planning around wildfire. You may remember past updates. It's been a little while now, a few months have passed, but the Board of County Commissioners convened a Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Council. That committee met for a series of months and then came forward with a set of recommendations to the board. And we'll get into more details on that in just a minute. But first, if you don't mind, if you haven't yet, we'd like to capture who's here in the chat, and that would also give Peter a feel for who's here. So if you could just introduce yourself, name, and if there's a relevant affiliation, that would be helpful as well. If you don't know where the chat is, you can go to the mouse over the bottom of your screen, and the chat button is there, and you can bring that up and introduce yourself. We'd appreciate that. As Boone was just noting, we did not meet in September due to the outbreak of fires that we had early in the month, and the commitment of most of the people, or a lot of the people that attend this meeting, were committed to incidents. So we're getting ourselves back on track here in October. Hopefully you had a chance to review the August meeting notes. And I would just pause here to see if anybody had any questions or corrections from August before we move on to Boone's program update. All right, seeing none, if you have any, you can always connect with myself or Boone after the meeting, and we'll capture those before we upload those to the website. I believe the video is there as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Boone for a quick program update, just to get you up to speed of what's been going on here lately in the realm of Project Wildfire. Boone?
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. So, yeah, kind of nice to be back. Like I was just saying, as we're getting started here, it's been a little bit since I've been at the meetings. Busy summer with running around between fire support and then working up at the coordination center as well. But all that to say, right, I'm getting back on board with all the pieces where we're at, and then as I cover things today, there's potential I'm missing something at the moment. We touched bases earlier this summer while I was out and I haven't circled back to you, by all means, get a hold of me, email me, call me, and we'll get things back on schedule. I don't want anything to fall between the cracks, but I believe at this point I'm getting most things headed in the right direction. So CWPP's Sun River is still, we're still working on that one. So we had it in a final draft form. It went out for public comment. It was out for about 60 days or so. Usually we do 30, but went out for 60. We did get a few comments back, had another CWPP meeting just to talk about those comments and see what kinds of edits we needed to make. So we're pretty confident in addressing all of those comments, and then ready to turn to obtaining signatures. A lot of those comments were around Senate Bill 360, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but there's a lot of that misconception that Senate Bill 360 has enforcement measures for defensible space. It does, but it's all post-fire, and so we wanted to kind of outline that a little bit clearer, not so much stating that it's post-fire, but that we have the Sun River Lighter Fuels reduction plan does have enforcement and works a little bit better. But either way, we're headed towards signatures for that. The next piece that we're looking at, or the next CWPP that we're looking at is the Greater Bend. So we'll be starting that as we go into 2021. So that's next one up. FactNet, I put that up there just as we're kind of looking at the program of work. That's our Fire Adapted Communities Network. They give us a little bit of funding, not a ton, but they give us a little bit of funding, but we also kind of use them to help guide some of the pieces that we are working on, and it's a greater network across the nation, so we're able to look at other examples that are of how people are reaching out to communities and coordinating between the agencies and the residents. So we're looking at a couple of pieces that we put together that Ed and I have been talking about them for the last year or so. You guys have probably seen them all over the place, but story maps. And today we're going to see an example of a story map, but we do have plans for 2 story maps coming up that we'll slowly kind of vet out and plan as we go into 2021, the end of this year and 21. But the Firewise communities, I mentioned it before, but the plan is, or the hope is, to build a web page, basically the story map that we can follow through where all of our Firewise communities are, but also share a lot of the projects that the communities are doing, and then also the resources that one another are using to kind of get those projects accomplished. So we want to be able to profile the communities and then also have a place that communities can go to look to see what it means to be Firewise and the resources that are available. And then the CWPP story map, with 7 of them across the county, there's quite a few of them to be looking at and continually working on, but a lot of them have a lot of overlap, and we thought the story map fit that pretty well. It's spatially associated data, so we'd be able to show where those CWPPs are, and then also we can talk about them and all their commonalities, and then still be able to pull them all out and show their uniqueness. So we're going to start looking at that work plan and beginning to kind of vet out how those story maps will be working. And then Fire Free, we got the Fire Free event is coming up here starting this weekend on the 26th. It's closed on the 1st, which I believe is Sunday, but it's the half price event. And then, so just for clarification of the group, because I do have a lot of phone calls and you guys will be able to share this out to all of your groups as well. But this fall event is different than the spring event. The spring event, right, is put on by the county. It is paid for by the county, so it's the free event, where this one is a half price event, and it's not put on by the county, but instead put on by Deschutes Recycling. So Deschutes Recycling only operates out of the Knott landfill. That's their one site. So this is something that they're sponsoring. We're not paying anything. We're not putting into it as the county, except promoting it and help them get people in there. But it's half price, so normal price is $4 a cubic yard, which in my opinion is pretty cheap, but if you can decrease the price, why not, right? So it's $2 a cubic yard if you're taking stuff there. Running 26th through the 7th and only at Knott landfill. And, the benefit to having it, well, one of the things that I think it just coincidentally lines up well is within Bend city limits, there's no debris burning allowed. So Knott landfill gives that opportunity for alternative to burning for the residents of Bend. Unfortunately, it doesn't extend across all of the county, but those are the reasons that it does not. And then the spring event, we had a very short discussion, Ed and I, just thinking about what the dates are going to be, and we'll eventually work those dates out. Firewise communities, we've been, with all the fire activity that we had this summer with all the fires, right? There's a ton of interest, right? I mean, that goes without saying that all those communities, really a lot of thoughts go out to all those folks that were impacted this summer. But it's also started that wave. We always talk about the wave and riding the wave and being able to kind of catch it while we can. Well, this year it feels a little bit like a tidal wave at times, where it's a lot of communities, and I'm having a tough time just make sure that I'm tracking them all along. We've got several communities that are new that I've never talked to before that are very interested in Firewise and what they can do. And I've got other communities that are moving along that we've done assessments for, and they're going down their road and trying to keep them moving. But it's, I don't know how many communities totally I'd have to look, but probably about 10 of them that are in some kind of iteration between just initial contact and partway through the process. So we should see quite a few communities come on board as being Firewise recognized. And then our newest one is Boonesboro. Boonesboro just became recognized this week before last. I'm not sure if anybody from their community is on, but if they are, congratulations on making it. Lindsay is the lady's name that I've been working with out there. But they started off, I think the first time I talked with Boonesboro was in 2015, and then we did an assessment in 2016, and then kind of hit and miss with them several times over the years, just because they had some turnover in leadership in their HOA. But either way, they've come together, agreed on a lot of pieces of it, and they've actually made it to their recognition. So one more community, which is awesome. So we're continually adding folks to that list. And then Ed, I guess I got a question too. Do you want me to cover the grants, or do you want to say something about grants right now?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so we also had our Firewise grants that we had out that were, everyone had applications out, and then they were due around the end of October, and there was $20,000 that were up for grabs, and it was $2,000 per grant. And I believe we had, I don't remember the number of communities, but I think there was 47,000. 21?
21, the $47,000 in request, but I think there was 21.
Okay, so $47,000 in requests, yeah, in 21 communities. But we went through and prioritized those, and we're getting ready to make the announcements of who those are being awarded to. So this should be coming out here soon, but we did have the usual criteria, and I will end up naming them, but basically it was showing that you had involvement from the full community, it aligned with your Firewise action plan, and you were already either Firewise recognized or on your way of becoming Firewise. So you didn't have to be Firewise recognized to apply for the grant. So those will be coming out soon. So I feel like I ran through quite a few things there, but I believe that's everything that I've got. And like I said before, I just want to reiterate, if there's something that I've been talking with you about and I haven't followed back up on it with you, I'm kind of getting back in the saddle right now. So as you, as you find yourself ready to start working with me again, send me over an email and we'll jump on it. I think I've got everybody heading in the right direction. I've got a couple more emails that are on my list of folks to reach out to kind of get us moving again. And yeah. Otherwise, I think that's it. Let me see here. I think that's it, Ed, if we're ready to transition.
All right, I'm just going to pause real quick. If anybody had a quick follow-up or question with anything Boone covered before we introduce Peter. All right, not seeing anyone. Just a quick introduction. Hopefully, a lot of you have seen Peter in the past. Peter used to be a steering committee member with Project Wildfire in a previous position he had with Community Development Department. Peter Gutowsky is now the planning manager for the Community Development Department, and he is the lead on this effort that he's going to be describing today. But if you think back a few months back, we were providing you updates on what we were calling the Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Committee. I see Chief Johnson is here. Chief Johnson from Sisters Camp Sherman Fire was a member on that, as well as Chief Kemna from Redmond Fire, and several other both community members as well as representatives from the building and real estate industry served on that as well. So the county received some recommendations from that committee, and we have now been thinking, we kind of paused with COVID as far as how do we get some feedback from the community, and it's pretty evident that we can't wait around on that forever. And so instead of waiting until we can do that in a more traditional or in-person way, we've lately been thinking about how to engage the community in a more virtual way through some of the tools that are available to us. And you are going to be kind of our beta testers. We've had an internal team working on getting ready to roll out this essentially kind of community engagement plan that includes a story map and a survey and a number of other ways the community can provide some feedback to us. And so Peter's going to run through that, and we're going to then welcome any feedback or questions and we are getting really close to turning this onto a live effort here, potentially by the end of the day, but definitely sometime this week. And so if you can look at this presentation with an eye towards any feedback that you might give us that would make this more clear, or questions that come up for you as you watch this, we'd appreciate that at the end of the presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Peter. Thanks, Peter, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Ed and Boone. Can everybody hear me okay? As Ed noted, the Community Development Department, in collaboration with Ed and Boone, have been working on a community engagement plan to receive feedback on some wildfire mitigation measures that are available to Deschutes County if we choose to initiate them. And so let me just, I'm in the upstairs conference room here at the Community Development Department. Just want to recognize our team. Everybody else is wearing masks and is 6 feet away from me. But in addition to Ed and Boone, we have Tanya Saltzman, Peter Russell, Tim Berg, and Ness Curlin, who are here to just also kind of observe when we get to the story map, kind of your feedback, their own impressions as we do a trial run. What I want to do briefly is just, I'm going to share my screen. I want to recap very briefly the Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Committee's recommendations, talk about a grant that we received last year, which has given us the resources, even in the face of this pandemic, to figure out creative ways to engage the community on this important topic. Talk about the survey map, run it through the group for your feedback and impressions, and then talk about the community engagement plan as well that goes beyond the story map to ensure that we're getting as much feedback as possible. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's make sure I can pull this off here. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Committee. We have a website that's devoted to this project. It completed early this year. Wildfire Advisory Committee, that I'll call the WMAC, met for about 4 months. They convened in September 2019. This web page here offers kind of a summary of their recommendations and also provides a link to a final report. They were directed by the Board of County Commissioners, as you all probably will recall, to consider updating the wildfire hazard zone map. This is a map that was adopted in 2001 that gave the county the ability to regulate or prohibit wood-based shingles or roofing materials. Anyway, I thought there was a comment there. Wood-based shingles, in any event, there was an opportunity to revisit the wildfire hazard map as it relates to new codes that were adopted by the state Building Codes Division. They're optional codes and they're called R327. And the question for the committee was, should R327 pertaining to these fire-resistant building materials that can apply to siding and decking, among other features on a home, should those be required for the new home construction in the rural county? In addition to that inquiry, the board was also interested in the committee's feedback on defensible space standards for new and existing development in the rural county. So ultimately, what the committee did is they made a couple of recommendations. The group was somewhat split. They, concerning R327, 6 members of the 11-member group felt it was important to maintain the wildfire hazard map, which applies entirely to the rural county, to apply that and R327 to all new housing construction in the rural county. And just to be clear, the wildfire hazard map that has to be considered with R327, these new fire resistant building codes, is based on state criteria per the Oregon Department of Forestry that looks at weather and slope and fuel hazard and fuel distribution. So in any event, 6 members recommended that these new fire-resistant building codes apply to the entire rural county for all new home construction. 5 members felt that the wildfire hazard zone should be focused on sub-areas based on community wildfire protection plans, and that as it pertained to these new fire-resistant building codes in R327, that it should focus exclusively on forest zones. We have 2 forest zones, forest use 1, forest use 2, and rural residential zone properties for new housing construction. So at the conclusion of these recommendations and the report, staff circled back with the Board of County Commissioners, and there was a sense that it was important to engage the broader community on their sentiment on these 2 issues. Is there support for fire-resistant building materials? Is there support for defensible space? And I need to mention that the committee supported defensible space as well in the rural county in these specific areas. So we were fortunate to receive a technical assistance grant last year in December, and we were preparing for a work plan to kick off for what you would call kind of conventional community conversations, getting out in the community, talking to homeowners associations. And of course, we found ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic. And so we paused and recognized that we needed to get a better sense of how the pandemic was unfolding and really gear up for the fall. And of course, no one could have ever fathomed the level of destruction created by the fires, not just here in Central Oregon with the Lion's Head fire, but all the devastation that's happened on the west side of the divide in the Santiam Canyon, in the McKenzie River Canyon, and in Southern Oregon, including the area, I know the areas around Eastern Portland were also very threatened, and there was many people who were displaced. So we have really committed ourselves, knowing that this topic is fresh on everyone's mind, to engage the community on these 2 issues of fire-resistant building materials and defensible space. So what we've done, and credit goes to Ines Curlin and Tim Berg, who have created our first story map. And what I'd like to do is, as Ed noted, is take you through this. And if it's acceptable to everyone, I'll go through the entire presentation, and then we welcome your feedback, from the font's too small to there needs to be greater context to any other issue comes up. I'm confused. You guys are an excellent organization to allow us to, as Ed and Boone noted, to beta test this outreach technique. The goal. So before I do, I'm gonna talk about our community engagement plan in terms of how this fits in. So it's our goal. Hopefully, we can do it this week, is to kick off a 2-month community engagement strategy or plan to maximize our ability to receive public input on these 2 topics. And in addition to your kind of standard press releases, we have a communications director who's connected, of course, to all of the media organizations. So we'll presumably get on the radio, get in the paper. We're gonna have a web link that will provide a reference or a link to this story map. So part of the message will be, get engaged, participate in a survey, There's information on our website with the story map for context and background. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to have 2 remote open houses. One on November 19th, the other on December 3rd. They will be convened by the Planning Commission and will start at 6 o'clock. The one on November 19th is going to have a Facebook link to it, a social media link. We've never done this before. And so we felt it was important to devote a concise meeting or open house that with the social media element. We will record it. It will be probably an hour long. Questions will be answered online, and that will be posted so that people who weren't able to attend that meeting can get that link, that video link and interaction at their disposal. We're also going to have an interpreter so it can be at that meeting, and we also believe I think we can convert it into Spanish. The second open house is going to be on December 3rd. That's going to be what I'll put it in quotes, a conventional open house where we're going to allow people to ask questions. And that's going to be a much longer meeting so that people can share their thoughts, their perspectives in, more of a traditional way, albeit remote, but people will be able to testify, or not testify is not the right word, but to offer their comments in a meeting using the Zoom platform. The last thing we're going to do is I believe we're going to be in a position to do a statistically valid survey that goes out to our county residents and asks the questions that I will be sharing with you momentarily to get their feedback as well. And we thought a statistically valid survey, which will be by phone and I believe also by text, more or less kind of covers the bases in terms of what we can do for the pandemic in the face of the pandemic. So the community engagement will be approximately 2 months long. We'll create a summary report and report back to the Board of County Commissioners in the new year to get their feedback and direction on how to proceed. So with that, if it's okay with everybody, unless there's some burning questions, I'd like to take you through the story map. And you can see on the left-hand column, there are 6 chapters, or what I'm calling chapters. And the first chapter is just the welcome page, that really describes, I don't know if you guys, can you guys see the full screen? Does that help? There we go. Maybe that's easier. You can see the full text. But we really want input on these, how we can, why it's important to consider these other measures that can help mitigate the risk to wildfire hazards as it pertains to defensible space and fire-resistant building materials. So this is just the kickoff. It's orienting the viewer to how to navigate the story map. You can see we have a quote from I think it can go down. Let's see here. There we go. Got to use the right mouse. So you can see we're quoting Doug Graff with the Department of Forestry, just acknowledging at the moment this fall when it just felt like the whole state was burning, that this quote was poignant to us, that no area in the state is safe from wildfire, and it warrants a conversation about considering changes in our codes that could help reduce the risk of wildfire. So here's the kickoff page to orient the respondent. We felt when I go to the second chapter as it comes up, we felt it was important to provide some background to the audience. And it's important to underscore that we assumed the layperson was navigating this website. So not everybody has the expertise that Project Wildfire has. So we wanted to spend some time providing context, and it's a bit of a balancing act, as I think everybody recognizes, providing enough information to motivate, inspire the respondent to navigate the story map, but not overwhelm them, or they're just apathetic to completing their journey to eventually these survey questions. So I'm just going to walk you through. Here's how we thought this was framed appropriately. The photos were, coming from our archives collectively in the county concerning how we've been dealing with wildfire over the years. So we called it Living with Wildfire. What is our local wildfire risk? We wanted to acknowledge that, of course, we live in a wildfire-prone region, and there is a hazard in Deschutes County. And hazard has an interconnection between the natural hazard itself and the vulnerability it presents to the built environment, to, of course, businesses, critical facilities like our schools and infrastructure, and of course, our population. So we then transitioned to a conversation or discussion about, the fact that we're seeing a greater frequency in large wildfires, as shown in this chart here, dating back just 40 years. Of course, we have wildfire history that I think goes back to the early 1900s. But of course, these are disturbing trends about the number of acres and the areas affected by wildfire. And I think the statement that we noted is worth underscoring, that wildfires have burned more acreage in the last 40 years than the previous 100 years combined. So we want to get the attention of the reader that this is something that, as all of you know, and is what Boone deals with on a regular basis, as well as Ed, how do we educate and motivate and inspire our stakeholders, our constituencies, our neighbors to protect themselves and our communities from the threat of this natural hazard. So as we transition along, we wanted to highlight some of the large fires in Central Oregon. We really struggled a little bit with these specific wildfires because we wanted to tie it to wildfires that impacted people, that weren't just solely on public lands. I mean, I can't remember the precise percentage, but an overwhelming majority, 70+% of our forested lands in Deschutes County are under federal control. So we focused on these wildfires that, of course, unfortunately contributed to property loss and evacuations and displacement. So, some of these fires we also thought were important to acknowledge, not just those in Deschutes County, but those that occurred adjoining to our county boundaries. And so this is a list of our wildfires. I think we can, as a note to ourselves, we should call out to the layperson which wildfires what occurred in Deschutes County and which ones, like the Lion's Head fire there in 2020, of course, which was in Jefferson County and impacted the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. But this was our intention here, is to acknowledge those wildfires that really made quite an impact to property owners, to residents, and even those of us who weren't directly affected just by the impact of large fires with smoke and traffic-related impacts and transportation challenges. So we got our hands on some photographs that I'll just point you through. Again, most of these are local. Of course, the first one that just whizzed by showed a sheriff's department. The smoke this year we felt was worth underscoring, even though we weren't directly impacted by the wildfires west of the Cascades. We certainly dealt with the aftermath of them. So I'll just let this go through, and you can see these. But of course, these were Camp Sherman fire here. The Green Ridge fire that just happened a couple of months ago. It's hard to, as we experience this Saturday, it's supposed to get close to freezing, I think, or below freezing at night. Just several weeks ago, we were dealing with smoke and wildfire and that vulnerability. So anyway, we hope that these photos, again, capture the viewer's attention. Moving down, factors that increase risk. We certainly felt it was important to acknowledge, as I think everybody knows, Deschutes County has been the fastest growing county in Oregon since the mid-90s. Every year we're per capita the fastest growing county. That is not likely to change when they come out with the forecast next month for our 2020 forecast. Approximately 200,000 people live in Deschutes County. You can see the population increase since 1980 is 220%. And so population, of course, plays a huge role. There's more of us here. There's more potential for mishaps, mistakes, accidents, and just the fact when a wildfire occurs, it's going to impact more of us than it would in a county that's more sparsely populated. Obviously, outdoor recreation plays a role. So some photographs that we gathered that showed, you know, what all of us experienced this summer as we tried to escape from the pandemic and get outside. It was, you know, very congested in many of our favorite places. So these photos more or less try to reflect that. The lower right-hand photo is a picture around Smith Rock where there's been some parking challenges. Scrolling down, you know, it's important to talk about climactic factors and the drought that we've been dealing with now for the last several years. That also plays a role, and it certainly, as I understand, played a role in the Santiam Canyon in an area and in a forest that typically is really wet and hard to burn with drought conditions and, of course, high winds, and a fuel source or ignition source led to some catastrophic outcomes. Moving down, the buildup of excess fuels. Project Wildfire has taken a leadership role over the years, of course, to try to educate and empower and encourage sweat equity and incentives to get people to deal with defensible space, to protect structures and life and property. So that's a photo that we thought demonstrated the need for certainly defensible space. Moving along to 2020, we wanted to just acknowledge our neighbors to the west and how that was a capstone moment to acknowledge this important topic. So, you know, we're quoting news sources about the number of acres that have been burned, the fatalities, lost, the structures. As I'm scrolling down, you'll see that we are calling out, not supplementing the smoke photos that I just showed, just the air quality and the size of the wildfire. I'll pause there, get your sense if you think those are effective. One on the left is of course, giving a sense of the scale of the wildfire. It's just, I look at that image and I can't, it's hard to put into context just how large those fires were. Of course, the one to the right is the air quality. Bend is there, kind of right there in the middle of the state with that maroon color. Of course, we had some of the worst air quality in the world. Scrolling down, this is just a video of the smoke seen by satellite. See if I can get this to work. Over the western United States, it just shows all of that smoke that went out into the Pacific Ocean on the West Coast. And as I think everybody knows, the Oregon coast was significantly impacted by smoke and air quality. So that's the end of chapter 2. And we welcome your input on how effective this slide is to the uninitiated about what it means to live in Deschutes County as it relates to our wildfire history and certainly our vulnerability. Shifting to chapter 3, we wanted to talk about our preventative efforts. You know, we could have spent hours talking about what we do across the county, across departments, in a leadership role to protect our community. And, you know, Deschutes County is very much a leader nationwide on this front. So we had to be discreet and strategic, underscoring what programs we thought would resonate the most. So some of the highlights that we wanted to call out, again, the 2001 Wildfire Hazard Zone, which prohibits the use of wood coverings like shake roofs. I think we may be one of the only counties in Oregon that even has a wildfire hazard zone. So this is the zone that we're wanting to revisit with R327. But anyway, we're highlighting the wildfire hazard zone. We certainly wanted to highlight this organization and the leadership of all of its members and its commitment to outreach, working with property owners. Boone's recap on the front end was remarkable, to talk about Firewise communities, the updates to community wildfire protection plans, which of course identify areas that need treatment, areas that I think can also be eligible for funding for defensible space purposes. We of course wanted to highlight this group and all of the commitments that each of you make to make it a success. Fire Free is another program, of course, that was highlighted in Boone's opening remarks. The efforts that are undertaken by individual residents on an annual or semi-annual basis, with the program that was just acknowledged half off this fall. So we wanted to acknowledge, all of the tonnage that is hauled to the landfill, again, as an effort to demonstrate what Deschutes County has undertaken. Fire Free is another effort that we highlight there. And then as we scroll down, this was our kind of catch-all, again, knowing that our respondent, the person who's navigating the story map, has a certain attention span, and we didn't want to overwhelm them. But at the same time, we wanted to acknowledge everything that we're doing here. So we created these lists, the voluntary measures on the left, and then certainly what's regulated under county zoning, again, to kind of provide that belt and suspender emphasis. So your thoughts and perspectives on how effective this is, is going to be important to us. So 2 and 3 are really the meat and potatoes as we lead into the issues that we want the community to tell us their forthright opinions on, which is Chapter 4. So as that comes up, we thought, okay, how do you title this? We thought, okay, let's recognize these as further additional measures. Of course, it's a little bit different than Chapter 4 there on the left, but this is how we drafted it. And we felt like, how do you frame this issue? What can rural property owners do to further protect their property, to protect themselves and their neighbors from the threat of wildfire? One is defensible space techniques, creating and maintaining 100 feet of defensible space around your home. And the other is the role that fire-resistant building materials can play for new housing construction. Well, how does this affect me? Maybe a lot of you, as you're listening to me go through this story map, and I'm sorry, I am getting to the close, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. How does this affect me? We wanted to ensure that people had a recognition of what these programs would mean to them individually. Take a moment to read this. What we wanted to do here is acknowledge the Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Committee did evaluate the cost of these fire-resistant materials that would be part of R327 if they were adopted into code. The Wildfire Mitigation Advisory Committee, which is a diverse group of stakeholders. We had representatives from rural fire protection districts, and we had representatives from the Realtors Association, the Builders Association, as well as the Planning Commission and others. They acknowledged a range to implement the fire-resistant building materials between $0 and $15,000. A housing impact study that came out from the state's building code division, pegged that number at approximately $1,200 to $3,000 for a typical 1,200 square foot home. And so what we did, knowing that in Deschutes County, we don't see many 1,200 square foot homes. We see, in many cases, palatial homes, but a 2,400 square foot house, rural property in Deschutes County, that number or that cost would be between $5,000 and $6,000. We provide a link to that housing cost impact statement because we thought it was important. And again, going back to the advisory committee, they acknowledged a range. We had representatives from the building industry. It was difficult to substantiate that upper range. We wanted to acknowledge nonetheless that that was a discussion point, but we anchored it with the evidence coming from the state itself, which was responsible for adopting these building codes and making them available as an option to local governments. So then we further fleshed that out. What does this cost mean to a house that's $500,000? Well, that's going to be 1.2% of the value or the cost of the house. And it was also illuminating to us that during the advisory committee process, hearing from some builders that they're already incorporating these building designs in their houses, in their construction, because it makes them more marketable. So that's why we have that range between 0 and 15. We settled on the housing impact statement from the state, but nonetheless, we felt it was important for those that are contemplating building a house or working with a contractor to let them know what this means to implement. Defensible space, admittedly, is a little bit more difficult because it depends on how big the property is. Has it been managed for defensible space over the years? So it was difficult for us to put a number down, but nonetheless, we spend time discussing what defensible space means. There's a definition from FEMA, what it looks like in the 3 zones. We were very, very mindful not to include any kind of prescriptive language here because we don't need to get in the nuance of what code language would be to the extent that there's support to undertake this effort, but we wanted to acknowledge how it applies. And all of you are familiar with defensible space provisions because you talk about it, on a regular basis with Ed and Keith. Here are some photos. We thought these were telling. The one in the middle, Boone took, and it almost looks photoshopped. It doesn't look real, but he took that photograph and can validate that is a legitimate structure with defensible space that survived a wildfire. So no one disputes the benefits of effective defensible space treatment. So that's an example of defensible space. We provide examples of the building codes here. Again, the building codes division focused on walls and gutters and ventilation and walking surface and decking. So I'm just gonna let you guys take a look at that. I'm mindful that I was tagged till about 8:45, so I only have a few minutes left, but we wanted to provide further context. Again, what does this mean to me as a rural property owner? What does it mean to someone who is considering building a home on property that I own in rural Deschutes County? This provides that context. There's a video that shows how effective it is. I won't play that in the interest of time. So I'm going to now go to the survey. It's not a long survey. I don't think we really have that many questions to ask. There's 6 questions. The first one orients the reader to where do you live in Deschutes County? Do you live in a city? Do you live in the rural area? Do you live outside Deschutes County but own property here? Or you're just interested in this topic, you want to share your opinion, but you don't live here or own property here. Second is, and I think this is just a good question for all of us, for Project Wildfire, for those of us in the Community Development Department, how effective is our education today about alerting our constituents, our residents, about wildfire vulnerability? Was this story map informative? How are they assessing their own vulnerability to wildfire? Okay, now we're getting in the meat of the issue. Do you support building codes which would require certain fire-resistant materials when constructing a new home in rural Deschutes County. So this is getting right to R327. As a follow-up, the county's wildfire hazard zone requires fire-resistant roofing materials. If Deschutes County requires additional fire-resistant materials for new homes, we provide some context there with siding, decking, and ventilation. Where should the code apply? So that, again, when one considers R327, there has to be a map that, of course, that correlates with it, a wildfire hazard zone map. So here was our way of trying to provide that anchor point. Should it continue to apply to the entire rural county, which is what our existing wildfire hazard zone does, or should it be reduced as recommended by the members of the Wildfire Advisory Committee to a subset, to those areas within a CWPP, to forest use 1 and 2 zoning and rural residential zoning. And then we also thought it would be important if people wanted to express other, they could select this box, and they have a character limitation. I think it's 70 characters to say or describe other areas where they think this should apply, or they could just tell us that, what they really think. If they, so be it, if they're not supportive. Here was our way of kind of pinning down the cost of R327 for a 2,400 square foot home, and whether they'd be willing to add this cost to incorporate these measures. If it was no cost, there's that option up to $6,000, which acknowledges the analysis that the Oregon Building Codes Division did, and then certainly over 6,000. So it gives them the ability to select their kind of comfort level from a cost standpoint. And then this is our last question. We already require defensible space in our forest use and destination resort zones. We're asking the respondent whether or not this should be expanded to all and new development, to all existing and new development in the rural county. Again, we wanted to provide an option for people to respond to if they had comments. So we have a credit and resource link that this will be filled out before we go live. DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation Development, provided us this grant. There's links, of course, that we can provide for the county forester, Fire Free, and Project Wildfire. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Thank you for allowing me to talk for well over 30 minutes. And why don't I turn it over to Ed or Boone for facilitating any comments that Project Wildfire has. We are all ears, so let us have it.
Peter, I'm going to start by just taking a couple comments that were put in the chat box, and then if folks don't mind, if you pull up if you go to the bottom of the screen and click on participants, they'll bring up a list of participants, but it also allows you to raise your hand. So if you have comments, that'll just alert me to that, and then I can call on you. But a couple comments from the chat box. One was Oliver was hit it spot on, like we've talked internally, that a lot of people are going to view this on a mobile device. I think he actually maybe used your link on the screen to just navigate to the site. So I don't know if Oliver had thoughts on viewing it on the mobile device. We have kept that in mind, although this the content has been changing pretty rapidly. So I haven't looked at it lately. I have looked at it myself as well. If you want to, you have any thoughts on viewing it on a mobile device, maybe go ahead.
Yeah, I do. My only feedback is that when compared to the desktop version, on the mobile version, it's a little harder to navigate because it opens up the story map, and then you have to figure out how to get to the menu. And each time you open a new part of the story, you have to open a new page. So it's just a little harder to navigate on the mobile version than it is on the desktop version.
Great, thank you. Ray sent me a comment that probably wasn't viewable to people, but he was just mentioning that a lot of people don't use Facebook. We have actually been using Facebook for different updates to the board as another option. So I believe our meeting will be able to be viewed like most county meetings through our website, but Facebook will be an additional option. You don't actually have to have a Facebook account to view the meeting through Facebook. So if you're like me and have tried to stay away from Facebook and think that it's the devil, then you can still view it without an account. We have been getting quite a few people viewing our different meetings. We did a wildfire update that was additionally streamed through Facebook, as well as our traditional channel, as well as our COVID updates. And I know that those get well over 1,000 views, way more people than would view it through our traditional platform. So anyhow, just know that if you want to view it, you don't have to have a Facebook account. Let's see if we have, Allison Green mentioned that she felt like the rabbit brush fire in the Cloverdale Fire District in 2018 that destroyed, I think it was 8 structures. I'm not sure if it was homes or structures, but was a good illustration of a fire that started on private land and a different fuel type than some people are traditionally thinking of for wildfire. So that would be one to consider adding to the list as one that destroyed structures. And then just scrolling down here. Ray suggests also, sent it to me privately, but consider adding a % increase to the cost of a 2,400 square foot new home, not just numbers. So Peter, I know we've gone back and forth countless times on percentages versus dollars, but that's a suggestion from Ray Meow. I think people can read these, but anyway, I'll get to you just a second, Nick. Just capture these last few comments. Chapter 2, Kathy Baker Kath suggests adding the B&B fire as another very large fire. Camp Sherman was evacuated. There were impacts to Deschutes County as well. That was one we had talked about adding, so that's one we might consider. Chief Johnson asked if the county commissions has reviewed and approved this survey tool. Peter, do you want to comment on that? I don't.
The board has not seen the story map. They haven't seen the details as we just shared with the group. They are aware that we're doing a story map. They're aware that we're doing a statistically valid survey. They're interested in seeing the statistically valid survey questions. But we are
I can step in too, Peter.
Please.
This is Tony DeBone here.
Oh.
So yeah, the Board of Commissioners were up to speed on the fact that this discussion's happening. The survey we all know is going out. We haven't really studied it or looked at it. Today, I'm on the phone today, so I'm not online. But yeah, we'll be following this also. So really, at the highest level, it's a community discussion about, future development and the big picture. So yeah, we're up to speed. We understand what's going on, and we're just welcoming people to think it through with us. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Commissioner. All right, yeah, Peter's still here. Lost your camera there, but you're still here. Ken asked what we do with the results of the survey. You want me to hit that, Peter, or do you want to?
Go ahead.
So the idea of the survey is just a gauge of public support to help the board just be just have a public gauge of is there community support for this, and is there more support for defensible space than building code? I don't think it'll be the end all be all for the decision the board makes, but I think it's definitely going to be helpful to know where the average citizen lands on this issue and how important they feel it is for us to move forward with regulations and requirements versus some of the approaches we already use that are more voluntary in nature. So that'll help inform the board's decision essentially. Boyd Turner asked, he thinks one missing piece seems to be a link to the map that shows where that forest F1, F2, and rural residential are. That is another one that we're, I think, grappling with as well, and might be in a, we're going to meet, I know, later today, and I think that's still one that we're talking about how to display that, or that's good feedback that it would be helpful to see a map of where those are. And then Scott says that he would recommend a link in the survey. I guess same to the previous question, showing where those areas might be, so that people are a little bit more informed of the extent of where those areas are. So, and then Nick, you've had your hand up for a while, so I'll go to you next if you want to provide any comment.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for the storyboard or story maps. That's pretty an interesting concept. I haven't heard of these before. So I think you addressed, Peter, you addressed a couple of the points I was going to raise, which is attention span. I have a communications background, so I'm familiar with the lack of attention that people have these days, and it can take quite a feat to get that much attention from somebody. So I think that's going to be an issue, to be honest with you. It is very comprehensive. That's on the good side. The bad side is you're gonna struggle to get people to follow all the way through, I think. But my bigger question is, how will you promote these story maps? How will you get the message out, and how will you engage and get people to do the story maps?
If I can, Ed, I'll take a crack at it and welcome your and Boone's perspective. It's a great question. I mean, we certainly, we are going to rely, Whitney Hale's our communications director, so there will be a press release that will go out to all the media networks. I anticipate emails being sent with the link to the web page, which has the link to the story map and probably a synopsis of what we're doing, being sent out to representatives within Project Wildfire's association. So ideally, for those of you who are connected to your homeowners associations or neighborhood associations, you have the ability to take that email and disseminate it or distribute it to other points of contact. We're using social media. Like Ed, I'm not well versed in social media, but my kids are, many people are, and as Ed noted, the numbers are pretty impactful when you see social media used appropriately to generate input and interest. The other thing is the press releases will also acknowledge those two virtual or remote open houses. Our planning commission, who's represents our diversity geographically of the county, will also be well versed. We'll send it to our city partners. All the contacts that we have will get a correspondent, and then I think we're hoping that the media does, I think this will be newsworthy, and I think that will also provide awareness for how people can participate. But if you have other suggestions, we're open to it. What we are here in community development, as Commissioner DeBone knows, we have a history pre-pandemic of doing robust community conversations through all corners of Deschutes County. It's just so difficult to do now in the face of the pandemic. So those were the prominent areas where we were focusing our attention, but we're certainly open to other suggestions if we overlooked an area or you want us to underscore a certain group or association. I mean, Central Oregon Builders Association, the Realtors, we will disperse this information or distribute this information as far as wide as possible.
Okay. and also insurance agencies as well, because they'll have direct access to a lot of homeowners, so they might be able to help you promote this as well. And maybe there's a way for the insurance companies to promote or offset the costs, because I think the costs will, of doing this will be, for some people, especially in the rural communities, they're gonna struggle to accept these additional costs. So maybe the insurance agencies and companies can help offset through premiums and reductions and things like that. One other thing to mention and to look into, I would recommend looking into, and maybe you have already, but the concept of behavioral economics or nudge theory. Maybe your people have used this in the past, but there are techniques for getting people to, you can design choices through these theories that will help people engage a little bit better and how to influence people a little bit better. So nudge theory or behavioral economics will help a lot in designing the communication pieces. And that's all I got. And I'll be working with Boone quite a bit in the coming months, so I can, if I come up with any ideas, I'll be sure to pass them along.
Thanks, Nick. We got a couple more comments, and then we'll do a short roundtable. But I do want to address a couple things. One is, no matter what outreach we do, it's not going to be 100% perfect, but hopefully y'all can help us spread the word. We'll be looking to a lot of partners to help make sure that if people want to provide their input, they have a variety of ways to do that. We will probably get actually more engagement through this method, actually in sheer number of people than we would in in-person meetings, quite honestly. And then George asked how this survey is not weighted by focus groups. One of the reasons we're doing the statistically valid survey is to capture that. So we'll be able to potentially compare, this one that's just open to anybody that wants to provide an opinion can answer this survey, but we recognize that it's not statistically valid, but we are then going to work with a outside firm to conduct a actual statistically valid survey. So we'll be able to both have that as another result, but also look at and compare results from this effort that's really open-ended and open to everybody with the statistically valid one. And then finally, I had somebody, I'm not sure who you are, but you were listed as iPad 2. Looked like you had a quick comment. I'm not sure. Oh, it's
hey, that's
Al.
me, Ed.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So just a quick comment. So the Living with Fire section, where the large fires listed here in Central Oregon that we did we either had evacuations or we had homes that burned. The challenge there, and I think the real story is how many of those fires that aren't on that list that were really at the type 3 level or just right on the verge of being really destructive. And they don't rise to that list, or they don't make that real prominent media presence because they come and go really quickly. And I think about some of the fires out of Lapine this year that were right on the back steps of Lapine. The Juniper Ridge fire that we evacuated a whole bunch of folks because of having a large amount of aircraft and our response with all of our partners. That fire came and went really, really quickly. Some of those fires on the list, the Frog Fire, the Millie Fire, the Green Ridge Fire, all of those were fires that we made conscious decisions to not go after early because of higher priority fires that could have been equally destructive, if not more, if we wouldn't have caught those. And many of those were just barely caught. We were right on the edge of having some really bad days. But that's where the resources went. And that's why those fires like Green Ridge, like Frog, like Millie, didn't get those resources and became large fires that eventually over time threatened a whole bunch of, either threatened or destroyed a whole bunch of structures. So there's more to that story than just those large fires that made the news. It's really about the ones that we either had aircraft here, we weren't in competition with other areas, or we honestly just got lucky. A critical retardant drop at the right time on the back porch of some homes. I remember the fire right out of off of Fry Rear Road the other day, where we put a bunch of retardant right on the back porch of a whole bunch of homes. And that's the only reason that one doesn't show up on a list, is because we were successful at a lower scale. So I don't know how to capture that, but there's a lot more to that I think the public deserves to understand, of how close we are to having much more destruction here in Central Oregon on a summer by summer basis. But most of those are just a blip in maybe a one day on the news, and then they disappear because smoke is gone and we allow people back into those homes.
Mm-hmm. That's a great comment. I wish I knew what the answer was and how to display that again with balancing the time, but we'll talk about that more potentially before we make this live later on today. Peter, anything else to sum up before we kind of turn over to our roundtable? I think this has been a good discussion, so I wanted to make sure and spend the adequate amount of time on it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Ed and Boone, for allowing us to do a trial run. Your comments are greatly appreciated. We will do as much refinement as we can, recognizing that balance between being comprehensive and not overwhelming the respondents and losing their attention span. I will note that, this grant that we received from the state does not obligate Deschutes County to adopt regulations. I think one of the questions that the board will ultimately consider is, it was the community engagement sufficient enough? And, the board could find, or we as staff may find, that doing another round of community engagement sometime in 2021 is worthwhile. So I don't want to leave everyone with the impression that this is all we're going to do, and then it's going to be a binary decision with the board to either go forward or not. I mean, we're going to all have to reassess where we are this winter with the pandemic, with community engagement. But I'm grateful that with the team that we have, that we're having the conversation now. I'm also very appreciative that we have Commissioner DeBone on the line, who offers his remarks and whatnot. So it's a joint effort by so many people. Project Wildfire, you're a big part of it. And I thank you for the opportunity and your feedback. And we'll certainly stay in touch and be ready for an announcement this week, sooner rather than later, that announces our engagement opportunity and spread the word. So thanks again for the time.
So this is Commissioner DeBone. One more note. Next Tuesday, we're having a State of the County address to Chambers of Commerce. So this is kind of a survey of what's been going on for the year. Usually we would have done that earlier in the middle of the summer. But this is already scheduled to be discussed and shared at that State of the County presentation by the commissioners also. So, we're already committed to sharing it with the world. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner. So I just put a request in the chat box, and I'll restate it here. If you have an update, please use the raise hand function. We've got a lot of folks here today. I think we were sitting at 38 for a while. We're down to 35 now, but not enough time to make it around to everybody, but I do want to provide a little bit of time for updates for those that have something that would benefit the larger group. With that, I will maybe turn it over. Let's see. Let's go with Dean. Quick update from the Upper Deschutes area.
Yeah, hi, Ed. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm having some technical difficulties, so I had to call in. Yeah, thank you, Peter. That's an excellent presentation. I like the pictures, especially the graphics really catch people's attention along with the text. And I understand the focus is mostly on new construction, but we do have over 200,000 people in Deschutes County, and a lot of places have already been built. So I don't know that it's your focus, but we do need to really help people make some changes, sometimes even minor changes to their homes so that they're more fire resistant. I live in the F2 forest zone, so it's pretty obvious to me for decades now what the wildfire exposure is, but we really need to be looking at it on a landscape kind of level, because you know, like in California, I don't know, was it San Jose? People were saying, oh, they expected that if there was a fire, it would be up in the hills, but then it moved into the community. And so even Bend and the suburban areas have a lot of exposure. Okay, so for the UDRC, we have 2 defensible space programs that we've been working, and we had a large grant for low-income seniors and disabled people, but because of COVID, we haven't been able to promote it very well. So we've just gotten a handful of applications for that. But we were successful in getting our grantor to shift a large, about half of that amount to our first 500 reimbursement program, which is where the homeowners hire a contractor to help them with defensible space, and then they submit a paid invoice to us, and we pay the first 500. And we've gotten, because of the wildfires, it's really gotten people's attention, and we've gotten a few dozen applications for that. So we're making progress in helping people on the ground, and I hope that people keep doing sweat equity, and maybe with the county's help with the chipping programs and stuff, we can keep making progress in communities. So I know time's limited, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Dean. David Mormon, American Red Cross.
Good morning, everybody. Just wanted to give you a quick update. It's been a very busy 6 weeks for the American Red Cross. Typically, the kind of response we have that we experienced in Oregon is what we would have on a hurricane. Maybe in other parts of the country, it was a national level disaster response for the Red Cross, and all of our local volunteers were involved in one way or another. But just some statistics, since Labor Day, Red Cross has served 231,000 meals to Oregon disaster affected folks. With our emphasis on COVID prevention, we really emphasized non-congregate hotel stays over congregate sheltering. So we had 10,000 congregate shelter stays, but over 82,000 hotel stays for evacuated clients. And of course, that's an increased cost to the Red Cross to pay for those hotels. And even as of today, we still have 1,700 households housed in 949 rooms in 68 different hotels around the state. And even in Deschutes County, we have 35 households who are still in hotel shelters in Deschutes County from surrounding counties. So just want to let you know that our Red Cross disaster response work is still ongoing. Probably will continue for several more weeks. That's it.
Thanks, David. Pretty astounding numbers. Thanks for all your work and your team's work. Alex Robertson.
Hey, sorry, just wanted to give you a quick update. So normally this time of year, we're pretty heavy-handed into prescribed fire. Obviously, things are quite a bit different this year. Just to highlight a little bit of what's going on, both here locally and nationally. We did complete, as of yesterday, 2,600 acres out on the Ochoco, the HEJ project out by Big Summit Prairie. So that was really our only entrance into prescribed fire this fall. We have a couple other units that are on the table. We'll see what the weather does to us. But the big thing for us right now is really similar to what happened this spring because of COVID, was a pause or a really thoughtful process of how we move forward on prescribed fire. What's put into place this year is a secondary level of approval at the regional level. So if we have a underburn or broadcast burn or jackpot burn that we want to accomplish here in Central Oregon, we fill out a risk assessment. We have that approved here locally by our agency administrators, and then we send that up to Portland, and that has to get approved at the regional level, sent back down to us to give us the approval to go. We have a few of those in right now. We're waiting for approval back from the region. Don't anticipate any problems. Our bigger problem is just the resources needed to accomplish some of those burns. And the reason for that is just the ongoing national situation. Northern California is still drawing resources, still drawing teams. The Rocky Mountains, or if you've watched the news, they still have a tremendous amount of fire going, including new large fires that are happening on a daily basis. And then really out of the ordinary, New Mexico, they've got a fire at 11,000 feet that went 9,000 acres that just took another Type 1 team. Some of the unprecedented things that are happening are our teams are incident management teams, which we have 40 plus in the nation between Type 2 and Type 1. Most of those teams, a large majority of those teams are no longer viable because they can't roster anymore. People are just tired. People are have to do their day jobs, and we aren't able to put some of those teams back together. The really scary thing, the August complex in Northern California, it's 1 million acres. It has 3 national Type 1 teams on it right now. All 3 of those teams are timing out. There's still ongoing work, lots of repair work. There's still communities, structures threatened, and there's 0 teams to come in behind them. So,
oh my God,
those 3 forests are going to have 1 million acres worth of fire with no incident management teams on it, just because there isn't anything left in the bank. So as we have folks here that are extremely tired, extremely fatigued from going on fires, the last 6 months, whether it's been in Oregon or Washington here locally or nationally, we just have a tremendous drawdown still. And as we think about where we move into fall into our prescribed fire program, there's a lot of hangover from wildfire season that's still ongoing that will prevent us from being able to do some of the things that we would normally do, even if allowed or even if we had conditions. So things are tremendously taxed right now, both regionally, nationally, and locally. So just want everybody to understand that. And as we continue to move forward, we're going to continue to strive to have a really robust prescribed fire program, but know that there's a lot of challenges to that organizationally for us right now. And that's my end of the report, unless there's questions.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Want to take a minute and recognize Thomas Stokely. Thomas, thanks for raising your hand. And I want to just take a minute for you to introduce yourself to the group, if you don't mind.
Hey everybody, I'm Thomas. I'm the new Extension Forester here in Central Oregon. I started back in July, and I apologize for not getting the chance to meet a lot of you in person. I've met a couple of you, at least remotely or in person, but look forward to being involved. And I wanted to announce that we do have a new fire specialist at Oregon State here in Central Oregon, Ariel Cohen. She'll be coming on board in November. So I think this group, there's a lot of things that I think Extension can help out with, specifically regarding the outreach and science-based sort of knowledge. So we look forward to working with you, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me at any point if you want to connect. So thanks for the introduction, Ed.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for joining us. It's got to be a challenging time to start a new job, especially when your job is working with people and the whole extension role there. So thanks for connecting here today. And finally, Ray Meow, you also have your hand up. Then if anybody else, just last call, if you have an update after Ray.
Morning, everybody. Thanks to Peter for a great presentation. Really quickly on the RFPD, Rural Fire District number 2, we do have a grant program for defensible space creation, open to groups of individuals or homeowners associations, not single individuals. And we have money in the bank for that. Just to let you know that we just gave $2,500 grant or a matching fund grant to Boonesboro and to help them along and maintain their Firewise status. So if anybody else knows of homeowners associations or large groups of individuals who want to work on defensible space, mainly the 0 to 30 feet from their property lines, do put in for a grant application for the fire district. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. And then last call, if anybody else either just wants to come off mute or wants to raise your hand, I'll call on you. If not, we're winding down on time.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. Great discussion today. I really appreciate all the folks that were able to spend some time with us today and give us some feedback. If you do have other thoughts and want to provide them offline, we need those very quickly. And I mean, like right after the meeting, send us a thought or two. If you think we're missing something in our story map, because we are getting ready to turn that live here with a relatively short turnaround. We do have a few edits to make, but send those our way and look for a chance. We will have this open for quite a while, I think at least a couple months through that public meeting in December. So we'll probably revisit this next month, just as a reminder that you can share it out through your channels with your community or other folks that you associate with, or get it in a newsletter. There should be plenty of time to distribute it through a variety of means so that we get an adequate amount of feedback and make this a robust outreach process. So with that, I'm going to thank everybody, and we will be back here in November if we don't see you before then. Have a great day, everybody.